Welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
Reid today. This is well, I wanted to call it your love child, but it's not a love child. But this was your idea, meaning you saw a blog post that one of our engineers, Ricardo Roman, put out, and you're like, hey, we should totally have him come on to talk about it. And I agree, it's a great one. But yeah, this is I almost feel like this was your complete setup. You did everything from like writing down the questions, organizing the schedules, getting everybody on the mic. So what are we talking about today?
Well, when you said love child, I wasn't sure if you were talking about Ricardo or the topic, because I've had an open man crush on Ricardo since we met him, and he knows that. And I saved him the embarrassment, or will I suppose, in this episode. But that's probably part of why I was so thorough, even though I didn't share the questions with you until this morning. Ricardo is like just the ultimate professional. And so I was like, I better make sure I take care of my part. And I wanted to follow through and get him on. So it worked out, and he was great, will be great, as you'll hear in a few minutes. But yeah, I think the engineering culture, even though it's small, like in Digible, meaning just as far as in proportion to the amount of folks we have on our services side, it's a really special group, and he's a big part of that. And so it's fun to see him step into this blog and share with folks how we approach brainstorming, or at least the engineering team does. And they borrow from Disney methodology. And so he wrote this beautiful blog, and I just couldn't wait to hear him kind of talk through it with us, because yeah, he's just a natural speaker. And then we, figured it makes sense. I think Victor felt the same way. He's like, why don't you let us come on as a pair? Somewhat inviting himself, but he knew that probably make Ricardo feel a little bit more at ease, knowing how, off the beaten path you and I can go. And so it was great to have both of them on.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy for Ricardo, because when we spoke sometime last year, he said that he wanted to start doing more content and just his own like version of thought leadership and building his presence. But he also really loves teaching people. And he was trying to dig at like what could he do to help teach people. And so he figured the blog and some other action that he's taking offline is a good way to do that. And I think this was a great topic. I know it wasn't his first one. It may have been his fifth or sixth blog, but I think it's a great place to start, because a lot of people it isn't just engineering, centric. It's really like how to brainstorm and be effective with it. And I thought he did a great job pulling it together. But obviously we stick on mostly how our engineering team uses it. But then towards the end of the episode, right when you had to skate out to a parent teacher conference, we kind of get into some examples that you can use, in your everyday life, whether you are a marketer or, someone like an internal team at Digible.
Wow, sounds like something I'll definitely want to listen to, David.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure you have this on in the shower, scrubbing behind the ears.
Oh yeah, I put it in the everywhere, like all echoes, dots, whatever, Sonos, like the podcast just takes over the whole house, when
Yeah.
I'm ready to listen.
I know you don't listen to a ton of them. I sometimes will play them back to see how the editing came out afterwards. And I found myself, I think it was last week, I was in the middle of a knockout task session, right?
Mhm.
And at first I started with my with like just some whatever music, and then I was like, oh, I need to see how that episode came out that we had to splice like 10 things together. Let's see how that goes. And so I put that on, and I only meant to listen for like 5 minutes, and next thing I realized, I'm like, oh, I'm like 45 minutes into this thing as I've been knocking out these tasks. So it can work. It's just background chatter. And I have to think of myself not as myself, by the way. I think like sometimes like you or I will say something and I'm like, hey, that was pretty good. Who is, oh yeah, that's us. Yeah. No, we say,
Yeah, that was me, more likely. Yeah, that I get a chuckle out of it. I'm like the cousin Eddie, on the show, like with the random like comments don't really make sense. I got a metal plate in my head type, and you're silky smooth with like all the references and knowledge throwdowns.
yeah, well, sometimes I did hear one the other day that I was like, woof. That was like a 90-second setup. You can tell that you and I had recorded it at like 7 o'clock at night after like 6 hours of Zooms.
Right.
And I was like, that was a little meandering. Could have used a nice producer on that one.
Yeah. there's definitely been a few of those. We should just freaking call it, like 10 minutes into those, because you can tell when those start to happen. And we usually just try to fight through, but probably better to just, call it a day.
Yeah. All right. Well, this episode will focuses mostly on the brainstorm methodology that the Digible Engineering team uses. But as I mentioned, towards the end of the episode, maybe the back, I don't know, 15 minutes or so, we'll get into use cases as well, where you can take it into your everyday life, or some ideas about how you may be able to employ it both for team building or, just for some fun in your everyday work life. So if that sounds fun, then stay tuned and enjoy.
Cool. All right.
Okay, Reid, you're going to kick us off with your summary. I was just razzing you that you write these things for almost every guest we have on the podcast, and then we never read them. So to make us both feel better about you taking the time, why don't you tell us what we're talking about?
Well, I appreciate that. And it's funny that it's never come up to this point, but I'm glad you are giving me a hard time, but also giving me the chance to actually read this. So today's podcast is going to be with the engineering slant. So I think most people that know the company realize that about a third of our FTEs are either software engineers or data scientists, data engineers. And we just don't spend enough time, or it feels like we haven't given them the opportunity to give us their kind of point of view on what's happening in their industry. So today, I'll put it this way, I guess. Software engineering remains one of the most competitive and dynamic fields in today's workforce. Many within the industry see it more as a religion than a profession, based on the various languages, disciplines, frameworks, and cultures being evangelized among tech cohorts and thought leaders. So today we'll be pulling back the curtain on some of these topics with two of Digible's own, our Director of Engineering, Victor Dozal, and Senior Software Engineer, Ricardo Roman. We'll also delve into the creative process of software engineering, so think brainstorming and hackathons, and how to highly technical and code-driven practitioners exercise and embrace the right part of the brain, more the abstract side. And then lastly, we'll get their perspective on current trends within software engineering and what they believe in the future holds in this rapidly changing space. Dun, da, da, da.
Yeah, bravissimo.
Yeah.
So, Reid, I think you wanted to start at least with background, right? That way people could know, why do I care? Why am I listening? So,
yeah, this is a fun background story between the two of you. I won't ruin it. I'll let you guys talk us through it. But how you guys came to know each other, and how you got ultimately to Digible. And then I'd love to dive in on the brainstorming side of things, because Ricardo wrote a great blog about it, just kind of the methodology that Digible applies and somewhat stole from Disney, which isn't a bad company to mimic. But I'll hand it over to you guys. Victor, Ricardo, you want to give us a little bit about your backgrounds and how you ended up at Digible?
Yeah, well, Ricardo, I'll pass it over to you. You start, since I usually start.
Sure thing. Some of you guys heard that phrase, say, don't be mean to somebody because you might end up working for them or with them, for that matter. Well, that's kind of what happened. Victor and I go back all the way to high school. And gee, Victor, I don't know if this is the first time I'm saying it. You weren't exactly my favorite person. I did not hate you. Don't worry about
it. That's funny.
I'm just kidding. You were wonderful back then. Of course, just writing a point right here. And it's just funny how life turns out. And then we end up working together. Just one day out of the blue, 2019, you call, like so many years after not talking to each other, asking me to see if I would like to join your team. That was quite unexpected, and definitely one of the best things that's ever happened to me. But Victor, I don't know if you have another side of this story.
Well, I guess I'll just say that back when we were in high school, when we met, all I can remember is that you were this shy, quiet kid that would go from classroom to classroom carrying his big guitar all over the place. And I used to remember that you were one of the smartest kids in the whole freaking school. So it was just amazing seeing you perform in many different places. And long story short, I later on, when Reid was challenging me to find great quality people for the company, he was also challenging me with finding people that were in my network. And I was looking long and hard at many different resources, and I thought of nobody better than you. After you posted several things on your Facebook page about certifications that you had received across multiple years, and I was just happy and impressed. I decided to talk to you further, and lo and behold, now you're part of the team.
Oh, thank you, Victor. First time I hear some of those words.
Well, I didn't remember the guitar going from class to class. So, Ricardo, did you like on your lunch break or something serenade the women of high school, or what? Was this a Reid? I'm trying to think of who's the darn man? I should know this reference. John Cusack. Like, would he be like John Cusack or something? You know.
Oh, say it isn't so. or no. God, did I have that? I'm trying. I know the movie you're talking about.
Yeah.
I imagine it was the teachers that were sitting around, like, listening to Ricardo play.
Could be.
Well, that's I love that background story. And you guys definitely have very different personalities, but you've been magic together. And, Digible's super fortunate to have both of you guys at the company and been a big part of this family and building out the vision. What you skipped, though, if you guys don't mind just finishing this piece up, is your actual like engineering backgrounds, because you guys definitely have different paths there, and they don't line up the way your actual history in high school does.
Yeah, well, Ricardo, take it away. I'll let you start on every question, and I'll just follow up.
Sure thing. Thank you, Victor. Okay, so we're doing the professional background now. Well, I've been a software engineer now, developing software professionally for about 6 years up until December 2020. And I've been fortunate enough to work in different industries. First, I started in telecommunications, then I went on to healthcare, then I went into IT, which for me was kind of redundant, doing technology for technology's sake. And now I'm here in digital marketing, specifically in the multifamily apartment industry. And one interesting fact about my career is that I am not actually a person with a background in computer science or fully into software engineering. I actually studied business informatics, which I think translates to something like management information systems here in the US. That would be my major. And then I have a master's degree in information technology, which is a similar field to this. And I think it's great because it's given me some perspective that is outside just the technology. It focuses on understanding the business so you can make better software. And I think that's had an incredible impact on what I do day to day.
Very cool. I did not know that. All right, Victorious.
Alrighty, well, on my side, I'll keep it short, but I am a classically trained computer scientist. I was trained to just look at the world as far as in a way that brings algorithms and computers and ones and zeros together. But my heart was always in creating businesses and creative thinking, etc. So while I always push myself to just be good at the math portion of it, my heart was somewhere else. So my background goes is in many different industries, all the way from e-commerce, healthcare, sports, social networking, gaming, etc. I started my professional career back, Jesus, it sounds like a long time, but 11 years ago now. And I guess I'll keep it, like I said, I'll keep it short, but now I ended up at Digible in the multifamily industry. It's a super exciting place to be, and looking forward to many more years working together.
Very cool. All right. Well, without further ado, Ricardo, let's jump into it on the brainstorming side of things. And not to stereotype, but I don't know if this is fair or not, but when I think about software engineers, I think more, the word engineer just connotes like programming code, like Victor said, kind of that classical piece of zeros and ones and whatnot. So I don't know if it's difficult, given that that's what the core skill set needs to be in order to be a really effective engineer, whether it's difficult to shift gears and really brainstorm and think creatively. But obviously you guys have a system here that you've employed and that you recently shared a blog about. So why don't you tell us, you can start if you want with just kind of that general, like I said, maybe stereotype, but how hard is it to kind of turn on the creative thinking? or is that actually something that you guys do naturally? It's very easy. But yeah, I'm curious to hear about that first, and then maybe you can dovetail into how we approach it at Digible.
Sure thing, Reid. And actually, your last question, how hard is it for a software engineer to be creative, is the crux of the blog post, because that's how it starts. A creative rut always strikes a software engineer, or sometimes we create them ourselves. So the premise of the blog post is, software engineers are using a brainstorming method that is used in the film and the animation industry. So you think people that are just accustomed to zeros and ones, numbers, math, all the technical stuff, using a process that comes from a really creative industry, such as filmmaking. And that's the idea of the blog post. How do you move something that is used over there to over here and actually make it work to avoid those that creative rut? I don't know if you want me to walk you through it, or...
Well, before you jump into that, Ricardo, I guess I just want to make the differentiation between creative thinking to problem solve very specific technical problems versus problem solving in the business space. And the blog post that Ricardo wrote tackles more of that business space of creative thinking versus the creative thinking that is required in order to solve some of the hardest problems that we face as engineers. So yeah, go ahead, Ricardo.
Sure thing, Victor. And it's well, yeah, like you mentioned, to solve business problems, because that is what Disney used to do. So the process, he used it to find out what is going to be the next film that they're going to work on. Out of all the ideas that they have, which is the one that's going to get created, that is going to have the focus of all their energies, all the work, their day-to-day work. And he did this by looking at one idea, or at each of the ideas, from 3 different perspectives, almost as if you had to look at it like if you were 3 different people. So these 3 are the dreamer, the realist, and the critic. And the first one is actually the one I think is the most challenging one for software engineers, and it's the dreamer. First, just generate ideas. Just focus on writing down those ideas, getting them out of your head, and nonstop for a while. And I say it's the most difficult one because I don't know if you've ever been in a brainstorming session. I have, like on my school or other jobs, and it's just a silence, really awkward silence, or it's just filled with ums and hms, and you feel like you're in a meditation chamber rather than a time to work. Or you look at the board and it only has like 2 or 3 sticky notes in there. When you look at the pictures that show you how to do this, and they always show these boards that are filled with tons of stickies or with different colors, and you look at the one you're actually building, it's just like 1 or 2 yellow stickies in there. And what happens is that sometimes inside of you don't know what to write, you don't have any ideas, or you do, but you're really afraid to voice them because you're thinking, well, my idea is really dumb, who's going to want this? Or if I say this, for sure I know this other person's going to take down my idea, he's going to say that it's not possible. So this first stage focuses on just write the ideas, stop the devil advocate that exists inside yourself from criticizing other people's ideas or your own. Don't judge them, just write them down, and then we'll get to the judging later. And that's the first one, the dreamer. The second one is...
Well, hang on, Ricardo. Let's unpack each of these. So, Victor, you mentioned business problems versus, well, let's say engineering problems, right? So, Victor, if you would give a little bit of maybe even an example, but just for the folks listening, if I think engineer, I'm like, well, how creative do I need to be? Aren't you given an idea from somebody, and then it's like you're told to go build that? And in this case, what this process, what you're talking through, Ricardo, is oftentimes like you guys are almost like the product development team at the same time. So I don't know, Victor may come with a business issue and say, hey, how would we solve this? And then that's what kicks off this brainstorm session. But Victor, could you describe maybe the difference there with this type of problem solving versus what may be in the day-to-day life of an engineer?
Yeah, well, I can try. I just came up with this example in my head, so it may not be the best one, but let's see how it rolls. You tell me how good it is. Imagine that I ask you, David, what is 2 plus 2? And then you give me the answer. Well, obviously the answer is 4. But then I ask you, okay, how did you come to that solution? And you tell me, well, I put two sticks together, another 2 sticks together, so therefore it's 4. And then I ask you, okay, but is that the best way to do it? So now that is an engineering problem. What's the best way to do 2 plus 2? Is it 2 sticks together and 2 sticks together? Is it the shape 2 plus another shape 2? Is it 4 sticks together and then just counting one by one? What is the fastest and the easiest way to solve it? Whereas a business problem is, okay, where can we use the operation 2+2? How can we get money from the operation 2+2? How can we get customers to buy the idea that 2+2 is going to bring them value? And those are the differentiations between, I think, between engineering problem solving versus, or creative thinking versus business creative thinking.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with our pal Manny from Rebel AI like a week or so ago, and I was just talking to him about why does he still do this darn thing? Like he's been doing, ad tech startups for 25 years. And he, in that conversation, he got into speaking about how he used to like. I told him I don't have hard skills. I can't have an idea in the middle of the night and get up and start doing it. And he said, yeah, he used to struggle with that. He used to always like wake up at 2:00 in the morning and be like, oh, that's a great idea. I want to do that right now. And it would get him into trouble. And so he said now, more recently, he has an idea. And then he's like, well, is there any business, benefit out of doing this before he jumps into it? Now, when you guys go into these brainstorming sessions that you do with the team, I think like once a month, or at least that's the cadence you guys were on, are you guys coming at first with like a business problem, or do you guys start with like, hey, we have access to this stuff. Now can we turn that into something valuable for the business? Or truly is it a mix?
You go, Ricardo.
Well, normally we always start with a business problem. There's a lot of problems already. So Victor kind of helps us there a little bit, filter down the list and say which ones are the most important. And sometimes as a team, we've decided which is the one that we're going to work on. Or other times, Victor already knows the full background of this and tells us, this is the one that's hurting us right now, the one that we need right now, or the one that if we do it, will open up a bunch more of possibilities.
Great. So we have a business problem now. And now you guys are like, we've got, I don't know, 3 days that we're going to work on this, like hackathon, if it's in that kind of capacity. And when you start off, Ricardo, via the Disney method, there's no bad idea. You just throw stickies up on the board. And that's like, nobody should take offense. All's good, Then after how much time goes by with this? Because I think in your blog, you talked about like a 2-hour time frame. So is that the first 30 minutes, or how long do you spend with the idea session before we get into the realist session?
The time varies. You want to give it at least 10 or 15 minutes. I think we found out that's what worked with us. But then we learn with each hackathon. Sometimes we say, you know what, it was too little time, and I had some other ideas that I think would have been great, and I didn't get to write them because I actually ran out of time. Or there's other times when the other steps just take way too long, and we eat up too much of our time, and because we have too many ideas. Maybe we should just cut it down.
Yeah, well, that's cool. And Reid, you may not know this, but I am specifically prepared for this podcast because this weekend I made Nicole watch 2 Disney movies. We watched first The Lion King, because I had this, that intro Circle of Life stuck in my head, and I was like, we got to do this. And then of course, like I followed it up with Aladdin, because I was like, well, I haven't had some Robin Williams in some time. And I don't know when the last time, I'm sure your girls have watched those by now, Reid, unless you have some Common Sense Media that says, which by the way, I did look at Common Sense Media. It said a Lion King is like a medium on the scale of consumerism. And I was like, they're not selling anything inside of Lion King. So I don't know what problem they have, but the reviews were saying like, but you can buy a lot of Lion King merch if you want. I'm like, okay, well we shouldn't blame the movie for that, because they're not pushing, Lion King dolls in the middle of the film. So anyways.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you went classic there, that you went with Robin Williams and not Will Smith. Not that he did a poor job, but the trend now with me and my girls when we're watching this stuff is the modern versions, which I struggle with because I grew up on the cartoon stuff, and I'm, a bit of I don't know, crusty about that stuff. But some of these new remakes have been pretty good. Well, bringing it back, Ricardo.
Well, hold on, Reid. I do have to ask, which one is your favorite remake?
Ooh.
And least favorite?
Well, I thought Beauty and the Beast was actually really pretty good remake. I thought they did a really nice job. God, least favorite? Well, I only watched half of it, so it may not be fair, but I wasn't big on the remake of Aladdin. So
wow, that is my top remake.
Well, that makes sense and it doesn't. I mean, you and I are like twins on the disc profile, but we have very different tastes in a lot of other areas of life. So
Yeah.
maybe I should have expected that. I may have to give it another run. And sometimes it depends on my mood, but I'm not saying it's terrible. I just I'm a fan of the classics. That's all.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So, Ricardo, I don't know if you and I have ever talked about design thinking, and I'm not going to move us that direction, but David knows I am a big fan of that and had some exposure to it before we were at Digible, and then we did that one brainstorming that you were here for at the retreat, or were you? Had he joined yet, Victor?
Yeah, he
Yeah,
was.
yeah,
We won. Don't you
yeah. That's
remember?
right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, well, I'm just recalling, like a big part of that is what you're describing also with the Disney, but like kind of that 2 hour like mad dash, if you will, get as many ideas out as fast as you can. When you guys are doing this, is that in silence as you talk about kind of the meditation room, like, or are you guys able to see as everybody's putting their sticky notes up there, or are you just writing down in privacy as many ideas as you can?
We haven't tried it just doing it collectively, voicing out our ideas and telling somebody specifically, hey, write this on the board. Normally we just put our head down and write it, but because of COVID, I guess, we do this on a virtual whiteboard using Google Jamboard. And if you wanted to, you could see what everybody else is writing, but you're really focused on just getting all of that stuff out of your head. At least personally, I never look.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I was just curious. I may have a follow up on that in a bit, but I want to let you get through this. So let's move on to the realist segment.
Okay, well, the realist is focused on asking just one question, and that is, if we could do this, how could we do it? And for each of these ideas, we try to develop a plan on how can we do it with the current technology that we have, or with the current processes, stuff that we have. Is it something that is real? Can we do it? And what we try to do is get all of our stickies, and each time it's different, right? We just find a way to position these stickies, and yes, it's real. No, it's not real. But we don't go into the critic phase yet. No ideas are removed. We just say, hey, if we could, how would you do it?
And Victor, you guys often are doing this in a hackathon manner, but obviously I'm sure you guys sometimes use this beyond. But what kind of constraints do you put on the team? Like meaning on the yes, we could do this part, I feel like your team often says, well, we can do anything. It's just we have to have enough time, right? So what kind of constraints are you typically putting on when they're deciding if this match is realist or not?
Well, that's really up to the team and the conversation that they're having. But the two constraints that I put on them when the hackathon is starting is, number one, make sure that it's something that you're going to be able to accomplish during the hackathon timeframe. And number two, well, I guess three constraints. Number two, make sure that it's going to bring value. Whatever you do, make sure that it's going to bring value and solve the problem at hand. And number three, it has to go through me. So meaning at the end, they have to present the result of the hackathon. And if I like it, it goes through. If I don't like it, it doesn't go through. And it's really that simple. So they're supposed to know my personality, and yeah. And just to clarify, that's another way for them to take the perspective of, hey, maybe halfway through the hackathon, maybe a quarter through the hackathon, we should go back to Victor and show him what we're thinking, what we're building, so that I can then go in and potentially course correct any of the assumptions they may be having.
Well, it's definitely a good question, and I think that would be where Dave and I would probably be most disruptive, about what we could or couldn't do, and at the same time probably be pretty fun. Um, I've gotten to the point, I've told David this, where I no longer believe anything is impossible, and that's probably a compliment to you guys. I mean, since you've entered the picture, and also now with Lurch's team, I feel like we can accomplish just about anything if we do have enough time. This leads me, though, just briefly, I don't know if this is much of a detour, but to resources. Because I think, I don't want to say it's easy to back off, or on some problems, and just say that's too big. We don't have enough engineering power. Meaning like the human capital. But I'm curious how important you believe like chemistry and continuity is in these brainstorms, like using this technique, versus if you were to invite in me and David for one hackathon, or if you were to invite in, I'll use our friends at Encoded, but where it's like, hey, we're going to expand this brainstorm to include some of the folks that we work with, that we periodically do some contract work with. I just want to know if you guys philosophically believe that these types of brainstorms do build on chemistry and continuity, or if that's not as important, and that you can, have kind of guest folks, participate and still get some success with it, or see some success with it.
I think it doesn't depend on the chemistry that the team already has, because we have thought about, hey, what if we invite somebody to the hackathon, at least to the brainstorming session? And we thought about some people. We just never got around to actually having a hackathon where we do have some guests, because organizing this will be a bit complex. We also got to make sure that other person has how much time is it, Victor? Like 72 hours, so 3 days for this hackathon. So no, we don't think it's fully dependent on it. But the chemistry of the team does play a role, because you already know who on your team is your likely devil's advocate. So you you know where some pushback is going to come from. But I think that if you have new people, that actually makes it richer. That will make your ideas more. They will have more variety, because that person was going to contribute more ideas, but that person was going to contribute more pushback when you get some to the other phases. So you could think about some stuff that you didn't think.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Again, I don't want to take us too far off track, but I think it's easy to argue both sides of the coin as far as what makes for a most effective brainstorm, whether it's good to have the same people, with that, I guess, knowledge of each other, like you said, what to expect versus what not to expect. Because I love seeing, like, kind of that, I guess, disruption enter the room and provoke some new perspectives. So, but we can come back to that if we have time. Anything else, Victor or Ricardo, you guys want to add on the realist, or David, questions on that one before we move on to the last segment of this brainstorm?
Well, I just wanted to give my opinion on that same question, Reid, very briefly here. So I same as Ricardo, I do not think that chemistry is a thing where if you don't have people that have already worked before, don't have the right chemistry, the hackathon won't work. But the result of the hackathon, I do think, will be dramatically impacted by the chemistry that the team has. For example, if there's a team member that, if there's, for example, there's 3 people right now in the typical hackathon, and if there's one person in the team that we know is a crazy good creative person, but this person has no limits as far as what they can dream up, that's great for the first stage only of the hackathon. But then somebody else needs to come along that has to play to the strength of being that person that, like Ricardo said, the devil's advocate. And so we need to play to each other's strengths and know who's strong at what, so that then we can look at a certain person and say, hey, you're stronger at this. What do you think about that? But yeah, other than that, yeah, I agree with everything else that was said.
Well, David, you may remember this when we were in OpTech. We went and peeked in at the keynote 2 or 3 years ago, and we were both, it left an impression, I believe, on both of us. Just so simple, but made sense. I forget her name, but she was just like, brainstorms are fundamentally like flawed, because they shouldn't happen with groups, with a bunch of people in the room putting up sticky notes and then like talking about the ideas. And it was all really based on the premise that inevitably it's impossible not to have somebody lead. And then what always happens is you start focusing on that idea. And so it actually slows down the process of a lot of idea generation, because people feel compelled to give feedback or how they might shift or pivot the idea. Next thing you know, you're locked in on just 1 or 2 ideas, instead of what she had suggested, which is actually have the brainstorms happen independently. And then, you bring those ideas forward, but you're forced not just to generate ideas, but probably go further into the process the way you're describing, Ricardo, which seems counterintuitive, at least to what a lot of people believe, which is it's about the group think. It's about giving each other a chance to look at other ideas and perspectives and build off of those. I don't remember like the full solve or how she, but that did make sense to me. I know it very much. I've been in tons of brainstorms, and that does play out typically. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, or David, if you have any better recollection of her point there, but definitely left an impression on me.
Well, she wrote like a book on the topic, but I will say like I didn't fully, I agreed with part of what she said, but I think part of the culture can also matter there too, right? Like definitely we've been in brainstorms together that have been productive, and then we've been in some that haven't been. I think the silent brainstorm where you do the sticky note and put it on the wall avoids some of that group think of after like we tack on the one idea. But I think there's definitely a place for both. Because I think about how like we've really adopted the EOS system, and EOS really encourages like get together and just effing solve the issue. Don't keep taking things offline. That's how nothing moves forward. So I think there's a place for both. Like sometimes we may need to feed off of one another in a brainstorm where like let me build on your idea. Other times I think it can be beneficial to like do a lot of like homework up front. So maybe that's something, as it said, Ricardo was saying that they are improving every time that they do this, which I don't know how many you guys have done now, but it's been a number of them. But it's like that could be interesting, right? Like if some people sort of do some pre-work and bring some stuff to say, hey, I want to advocate for this thing, versus like, do we do the group together, start from nothing? So I don't always love going like saying it's a balance read, but I think that it depends on both. Like they can both have value though.
Yeah.
I think the important there is just to I do think that there has to be one person that clearly leads the brainstorming session, and that's what I have found to be one of Ricardo's strengths. As far as when the team is brainstorming and following the process, Ricardo is very good at being non-biased and not focusing on any single one idea. And instead, when somebody is attempting to do something like that, he's very quick to say, "Hey, we're focusing on this one thing. We should probably not do that. Let's follow the process. Let's move on." And so there has to be at least one leader that has the capability or the strength to put that hat on and just be able to bring the group back to what they should be doing, which is brainstorming rather than focusing on any one single thing.
It's a moderator. I'd love to see Ricardo. Reid was just razzing Ricardo in this morning's roundup, like about his presentation skills. But love to see Ricardo be like, "Hey, Reid, quiet down. We got to follow the process. Let's move forward."
Well, let me just say, razzing in a good way. I love Ricardo's public speaking, and I could see him being a great facilitator. And that is one of the, if not the most key role in brainstorming from my experience too. So I'm glad you added that in, Victor. I mean, if you have somebody that doesn't have control of the room, you're in for usually a pretty unproductive day. So cool to hear. Why don't you take us now to the last piece here, this methodology.
Sure thing, Reid. And just before that, this is the part where I say, "Oh, thank you guys for all your nice words." But no, I really take them to heart, and I appreciate that you see me that way. And just before we leave off the other point, or talking about the moderator, really that's something anybody can do at any point in these brainstorming sessions. And I took the idea from the EOS too, because in the ideas section, which where you got to get down and just solve this issue, there's always this thing called a tangent alert. Anybody can just grab whatever they have in their hand, a flag or something, to say, "Hey, tangent alert, people, we're drifting off point. Let's get back to what we were doing." And yeah, it's really important to have that. And same way, we need somebody to take us through each of the steps. Just like right now, I'm doing it, and I'm taking you to the critic step, the third one. That was a nice segue, huh? So in the critic, that's where you finally let go of all those feelings. There's some people that really love playing the devil's advocate or punching holes into other people's ideas, and they've just been holding it back since the dreaming state. This is their time to shine right here. So you grab each of the ideas and you try to poke holes on it. Well, we can't do this because that, or we couldn't execute this because of this, or that idea could work if we do that, or this problem is going to come up. Let's find a way to fix it so that we can do this idea. And that's where the filtering of ideas really happens, and you're left with really the stuff that matters, the stuff that you can do, and the one that you should focus all your efforts on.
Well, Reid, I'll let you go. I keep bogarting the first comment.
No, that's fine. I can't help it because I know the players. I'm curious to hear about who plays what role more often, and give me some of the war stories. But yeah, go ahead, David. I don't mind.
Well, I was just immediately struck by, I feel like I used to be known as like the hole punch. But I feel like, Reid, this is more just, I find it interesting how I've almost had to transition. And I think it's more because like the more folks we get on the team, I don't want to be seen as like a whack-a-mole on ideas, right? So like when I used to vet vendors and all these other things earlier on, I was always more just like doing the punch holes and devil's advocate, of course, with trying to move things forward and not just put up a roadblock. But now I think if I was joining the group, I would be less of the like, the block and more of the like encouraging, trying to, as you and I have talked about, like being more inspirational for the team, which then means like the two of us would need to make sure that we have someone there so that we walk away with something that's well, I say actionable, but that you can actually do something with versus just talking big ideas all the time.
Yeah, well, I totally agree. I think you've made a notable shift, and I applaud you for that because I think it's been going really well. But sometimes you still need to be the asshole. No, pardon my French, but and play the whack-a-mole or whatever you want to call it, because you're good at that too. But I think I keep coming back to the facilitating though, or the moderator, whatever we want to call it. But this is a tricky one, because it's important that somebody is punching holes and critiquing some of these ideas. But you don't want that to obviously, I guess, break the trust or dampen the enthusiasm. So that the next time, I guess, you're still getting the same engagement level from some of these folks whose ideas start to get kind of I don't want to say shredded, but just picked apart a little bit. But you also don't want to make it a little league scenario where everybody, these are all great ideas, and nobody's really being critical. So I'm curious how you've approached that, Ricardo, since Victor said that you've been really effective with it. How you approach this part of it. I don't know if you want to give us specific examples, from past hackathons that we've had, or if you just want to kind of keep it at a high level. But what are your thoughts on how to best approach this last piece of the brainstorm?
I can't recall a specific example because I think there's been just too many instances where that's happened. But okay, not to name names, but our popular devil's advocate is Emino. He really likes to punch holes on somebody's ideas.
I love it.
But it's
I
also,
guess just a side note, but internally, I sometimes I like to tell him that he sounds like Igor because he's
wow.
sometimes. So whenever I'm on my one-on-one with him, I ask him, "Hey, how are you doing?" And he's like, "I don't know, okay."
Wow.
So, but yeah, he's a fantastic guy. He loves punching holes into stuff. He's extremely valuable. So sorry about that, Ricardo. Go ahead.
Well, the cat's out of the bag now. I can't wait to call him Eeyore on the next roundup. I'm sure he'll be eternally grateful to you.
Oh boy, I'm not gonna hear the end of it when he listens to this podcast.
That is a Disney character, so we're still on point here.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Still on theme, yeah. Well, like I was saying, he's our favorite hole puncher, but it's also time for the other person, or not just the author of the idea. Anybody in general can go ahead and defend that idea and say why those holes are not valid or why we could cover up those holes easily. And it's something about Emmanuel is, for example, he is one, actually of the three of us, he's our newest member, right? So that's actually cool because he's not boxed into all the ideas and the frames that we've built around ourselves that we've been working on Fiona code a little bit longer. So I guess that's why he likes to punch those holes. But it's also a time for us to exercise our memories or our minds to see if we understand how Fiona truly works, that we can say, no, those holes are already covered, or we've got a solution for that hole. And sometimes the monitor has to kick in, but sometimes that monitor can't be Victor. So some of our brainstorming sessions is just us three right there in the team. Victor likes to come and go, or sometimes he likes to stay there and just be the quiet man in the corner listening to watch the team destroy itself as they develop ideas. But he's really quick to intervene and kind of say like, hey guys, well, here's the thing about this. He that's where he pours his knowledge over us. It's a time for us to learn. And then that's where you learn that, these holes, they're not really holes, or they're just black holes, and it is truly a problem that we didn't think of.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask. I mean, we already kind of touched on this a little bit as far as like the guest attendees, but so far we haven't done a DNA engineering hybrid like brainstorm. And Victor, you've been pretty open, and I don't think it would surprise Lurch to hear this, but one of your concerns, I don't think it was so much chemistry, but I don't want to. They're more methodical, more perfectionist, if you will, and we are stereotyping here, but I'm just paraphrasing. So I wonder how often, if that's normal in most companies that do have a blend of data engineers versus software engineers, whether they stay siloed. We try to break down silos at Digible, just generally speaking, because we do favor, kind of just crossing the aisle, if you will. We think that we're better because of it. But I don't know, to the extent you're comfortable talking about that. Do you know whether that is common, uncommon? Because if Eminal is the Eeyore, like with you guys, I can only imagine what some of you guys would be calling some of the data folks. Because I think that's all their brains probably would do, right? Is maybe punch holes on how that would get done. So any comments there about, because I still want to see it happen. I think it'd be a ton of fun, and I may or may not get to be in the room, but I'll at least ask for a hidden camera or something so I can get some popcorn.
So just to be clear, what was the specific question?
It's like, was that just a Reid rant, or is there a question? My question is, why haven't you guys paired up? I don't buy that it's all scheduling. And do you think that you're going to pair up in the future? And then the third part of this is this a Digible thing between software engineers and data engineers not getting together on brainstorms, or is this a industry-wide thing?
Whew, 3 questions. Let me start with the one that I remember. So why hasn't a hackathon between data and engineering happened? So that's a good question. I've been personally trying to think about a way to integrate both teams, but it's as they say in the world of data, garbage in, garbage out. And so if you have a hackathon as far as, hey, let's get very quickly this data source and stick it into a product, you may end up with a crappy product just because, well, you have garbage data. And so with data, you have to be a little bit more methodical in the way in which you process the data and you deliver the data. So it could be a little bit harder to achieve something like a hackathon with data. However, the place where I could see it happening is with some sort of product where some basic machine learning algorithm could be used. For example, if we were to have another hackathon in relation to Fiona alerts, where we let the user know, hey, you should really look into this key piece of data because it's not normal. It feels like that's something that the data team could be good at, helping us come up with a very quick MVP. But at the same time, it'd be difficult because, as often, like I said before, garbage in, garbage out. So, and I guess the other thing is, like you said, Reid, their team, and rightly so, that they have to be full of perfectionists, or they have to be more on that side of the personality spectrum. And so it's really hard to have hackathons with people that have that sort of perfectionist personality, or it's at least important for those people to remove themselves out of that perfectionist personality, because in 3 days, there's no way in heck you can write a book, for example, in 3 days. And if you do, you have to expect that it's going to be full of holes. So yeah, that's my take on your question. But Ricardo, do you have anything to add there?
Well, that's helpful, and I'll give Ricardo. But the last part of the question was: is that the norm in the? If you can speak to that, if you can't, no big deal. But in the tech community at large, is it rare to pair up data engineers with software engineers and hackathons?
To my knowledge, I've never truly been or heard of a hackathon where you ask somebody to play the role of a data engineer or a data scientist, because those are things that, like I said, just take a little longer to get right. Usually when you're working in a hackathon, you get somebody that is the product manager, you get somebody that is the researcher, the UI UX researcher, you get the software engineer, because those are things that you can play with very quickly. Whereas the other rules in the data world today, they just don't play in that way. I don't think. But again, Ricardo, if you've seen something different, please chime in.
Well, I haven't had that much experience in hackathons as you have, Victor, outside of Digible. I've only had a few, but I do know that a team is usually comprised of different disciplines. But it's true what you said. I have to agree that you have to separate a little bit the disciplines that are concerned with data as something different or something special. Something that I would add here, though, is that we can look at other companies like Spotify. I read a long time ago a blog post of theirs about how their teams work together, how they come and work. And their teams are composed of different disciplines, but they each work on a specific piece of the product. And they have a saying that goes something along the lines of service above work. So you focus on servicing others. The other teams are your clients. They're your internal clients. So you really focus on making life easier for them. So it's not like usually two teams get together to execute on a project or a product that they're working on. Each team owns the product and they just go to other teams for what they need. And the other teams just make sure that they provide all of that which they need, not directly working on the project as one giant team just for that specific time. They really work on their own pieces, but they make sure that each other have what they need from the other.
Well, this was taking me right to where I was wondering. I mean, obviously, we have conversations constantly. If should Digible kind of stop trying to take on so many new projects and ideas and stuff? And obviously, this hackathon or brainstorm session is typically when folks are like short on ideas. I remember when Reid first got to the post and he was like, let's have a digital brainstorm session. I think, Reid, was that once a week or something that we were doing that? Yeah.
Yeah. Digital Poet Society.
Yeah. And we didn't have like as many at the time. The newspaper was kind of like, didn't have a lot of ideas. So I think it was very beneficial to try to jumpstart creativity, right? In the Digible environment, the culture has been that everyone's got an idea. And now it's how do we find the resources to execute it? So I was getting excited during this conversation about like, well, shoot, how do we wrap other team members into this or other, like somebody from paid media, someone in the client services? But it really strikes me that most of this requires engineers, right? And if you need a UX person, a back-end person, a whatever person, it's like we've only got so many of those to go around. So we can't exactly have, like just like, let's say every week you guys join a new team to do a new hackathon, because the outcome of this is often really cool stuff, but it's not yet prime time, right? Typically it requires, great, now we have a proof of concept, an MVP that we can float to some people. But this requires some maintenance. It requires some fine tuning, and we really have to like finish productizing it. So I'm just wondering from both of you, and maybe I'll start with Victor, like what have you guys learned through this process, and how can both us internally kind of like build on the success you guys have had with other teams? And maybe you have an idea of how to execute that where it'd be beneficial without having engineers. And also, like, obviously, what should our customers take away from this conversation? Like, is there anything that they could get out of this if they don't have access to engineers?
Well, you guys love those loaded questions. Where do I start? Let's see. So what has been some of the biggest learnings as part of the hackathons? For me, from the role that I currently play with the company, my biggest piece of learning, and this is going to sound funny, but at the same time not, is that while we should be moving fast, we also need to balance that moving fast with the expectations of other people inside of the company. Last year at some point, we were moving, I'm going to say, so fast that we were getting complaints of, hey, we don't know what's going on in Fiona anymore. Please slow down. Let's slow down the releases. Let's make sure that we write some newsletters, some documentation pieces, and that's all understandable. So now the question for me at that point was, how can we continue having the hackathons in a way that doesn't mess with the expectations of the rest of the company? And so at that point, it's a matter of making sure that you involve other people in the company to get the desired result and effect during the hackathon. So before the hackathon happens, agreeing on what is the problem to solve. During the hackathon, making sure that the people who should be the main stakeholders have at least a little bit of the opinion on what's going on. And then at the end of the hackathon, following with the people that should care about the feature and giving their opinion on whether it's ready or not. And if it's ready, then what's the best way to get it out there as quickly as possible. If it's not ready, then what do we need to get it out there? I think those have been some of the biggest learnings from the role that I'm currently playing. But Ricardo, you go ahead and take the rest of the question as far as what have been some of the learnings from just being the person that works the product or the hackathon.
You can never stop learning. There's always something new to learn, and you don't have all the answers all the time. What you were speaking about, Victor, right here, yeah, I think there's another thing. Where do you strike the balance between, I want to move fast, I want to make this product as fast as possible, but I also have to make it maintainable, because am I ready for when it's going to potentially break, or when the user is going to ask a lot more out of this feature than we expected? So where do you find that balance? And I think that's the question that's been going on in engineering since engineering exists, I believe. And it's the one we face every day, because am I ready to launch this product? Well, it does. You always say about this, it does a happy path, right? If you go through the happy path where everything is just the parameters that we need, or the way we thought the user is going to use it, it's just going to happen. Yes, but then am I ready for the unexpected? How probable is it that this unexpected thing is going to happen, and how am I going to get ready for that?
And just to clarify, oh, sorry, David, just to clarify, for those listening that do not know what a happy path is, Ricardo, would you mind explaining that?
Sure. So when you write a piece of software, a feature or something, they tell you this is what the user is going to do with this feature. They're going to, I don't know, for example, a calculator, they're going to punch in these numbers, they're going to push enter, then get this response back. Okay. So the happy path is that I'm always expecting the user to punch in those same numbers and so that they can produce the same result. But the unhappy path is, what if the user punches in something else, or something that I didn't expect? You just reminded me. There's a joke about it that explains this really clearly. It's a QA joke. So a testing engineer walks into a bar and he orders a beer, just one beer. Okay, so that's fine. But then he tries to test the other functions of the bar. He's going to order -1 beers. He's going to order 0 beers. He's going to order 9 million beers. He's going to order a lizard. He's going to order something unpronounceable, blah, 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 blah. Okay, everything works just fine. Then the first customer comes in to the bar. He asks where the restroom is, and the whole bar blows up and everybody dies. They weren't ready for that.
Oh, man. That's funny.
Yeah, nice work, Ricardo. Well, as I was thinking about, like, how would you apply this to other teams? Tell me what you guys think about this, whether it's internal or to customers' teams. But on internal teams, you could have something like, I'll say on our SEO department, they're really deep into thinking about CRO, conversion rate optimization. So they might have, let's say, a hackathon, or I could lead that, right? Where I'm like, hey guys, let's see if we couldn't figure out how to use this CRO tool to roll out to 100 clients tomorrow, right? And that may be the starting point, and then let them go through the whole process that you described, Ricardo. Or for Nicole's team, it could be like, hey, we're now connected to Yardi. Let's see what we could do with our reporting templates with Yardi data, and then they could take that from there. So it's way more contained, but it's kind of like using some of the tools at our disposal that maybe don't require a hard engineer, right? Versus maybe on some sort of frequency, like once or twice a year, we could get you guys involved in other teams too, where let's say like once a quarter, you guys join, you do a hackathon with a different team. That way, like you're touching, like we have 3 primary teams when it comes to the services side. So you're touching each of those teams once a year at least, right? And so they can sort of like learn from that and see how they might take it, which to me feels the same for our customers. So our customers, like with their marketing team, they could do a hackathon on like Google Optimizer. Like, hey, let's see how we might be able to use this free tool to optimize our websites on our own. Or they may have like a special kind of Excel report or something that they're pulling together for each of their properties now, and they could do that same reporting sort of template with their Yardi or RealPage, or I think of Lincoln does a lot with like Data Studio or something, right? Like, oh, could we build something with Data Studio so we don't have to do this manually? Or one more idea for those customers listening, but they could try doing an email campaign, right? So like, hey, let's see if we can't develop like a 10-step email nurture campaign for clients that haven't converted. So those are like little projects that everybody always has on their like, shoot, that's something I want to get to list. but nobody ever has time to get to that list. And therefore it's like, let's use this as an excuse to do this together and have some fun and do some team building, but maybe something will come out of it. So this takes me to the question, which is like, how do you guys settle? And maybe I'll start with Victor, but one thing that I'm always careful of with culture is, let's say that you guys are going to do a hackathon or one of our teams or a customer, and accepting failure, that like you guys may spend 3 days on something and it may blow up, as Ricardo says, the whole bar explodes, right? Or like other folks just don't see the value in it. How do you make sure that that doesn't feel like a wasted 3 days where you're killing people's like motivation? Because I'll say, like when Reid was doing the Digital Poet Society at the Post, that started to happen. We had all these great ideas, but we could never get anything done. And therefore people started getting really grumpy about attending those.
Yeah, so that's a good question, and that's another I would say big piece of my role here. So when the hackathon ends, there's a reward at the end of the hackathon. If everything goes well, then the team gets rewarded. If the hackathon doesn't go well, then there's no reward. And so when the time feels like it was wasted and there's no reward, obviously morale will go down. There's no way to prevent that. But what has to be done, or what you have to think about as you're trying to lead a team, is how do you help the team recover from something like that as quickly as possible? And that's where things like one-on-ones come in. So making sure that you ask questions, making sure that they understand the bigger picture, making sure that everybody is in tune with where we're going and why we're trying to do these hackathons. And the goal here is not to be, I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to change the world here in our own way. But if it doesn't happen on the first try, successes are built on failures, not the other way around. You learn a lot more from failures than you do from successes, and that's something that I try to remind the team of constantly. But Ricardo, now I guess same question to you would be, how do you deal with that sort of stuff internally?
Well, I have to go with what the last thing that you just said. You know, success are built on failure, and I'm reading this book right now by Ryan Holiday called "The Obstacle Is a Way." It's really about how the things that stop you, some things are actually the things that you need to keep going, and that's what it is. Failure is part of the journey to success. You have to accept with that. And you know, not to make this a nostalgic moment or shed some tears right here, but I have to thank you for that, Victor, because in those one-on-ones, that's something that you let us realize that I see you're already crying. Failure is part of something that we're gonna see, and you've been there to like let us know that it's not that bad. We can actually build upon this. And in the hackathon specifically, that's actually one of the key things in your role. I do remember one hackathon, I can't remember if it was the second one or the third one, but it was the end of the second day or third day, I think, and we really felt completely demoralized. It was really late for us already in the day, around 4:30 p.m., and that was super late already for Emmanuel. He's in another time zone. By that time, he was probably already on the next work day already, and we just sat with this thing with the code, and we're like, it's not done. We've got a lot of things to do, and then that's when you come in, being a little bit outside of the box, so not involved in the development process, right? And you come in with your fresh perspective and tell us, well, guys, it's what you got right here. This is it. You know, you just strip this thing away and this thing away, which is blocking you, and you actually got what I asked, or what I asked for. Well, the problem that we're trying to solve is already there. So you guys are just, you know, really boxed in on this thing. You're not looking at the bigger picture, and that's where you come in. You pull us out, and I don't want to sound like too cliche, but you rescue us from that.
Yeah. Well, that's a great example. And I would also tag on, the frequency probably matters, right? So like Reid had mentioned the brainstorm session with the entire company 2 years ago, but we only did that entire company brainstorm once, right? And so if something doesn't come out of it, people are like, wow, I had this really great time. I had all this energy and excitement built up from the session, but now what? Where did those projects go? Right. And I think that with you guys have gotten on a roll. So maybe that chemistry thing that you talked about, we don't have to rehash that. But since you're on a roll, you're like, well, if it didn't work this month, we got next month, right? And we can try again. And because you guys were doing it on a once a month cadence, it gives you a frequency to sort of like fail and be like, there's going to be a next time. like if I did all of my run training all year for one 5K and then that 5K didn't go well, I'm going to be pretty bummed that like, man, I just burned this year. Right. So, for our clients and for, the other teams that may pick up something like this, I think that's important. Just help set expectations, but also don't. So I like the part of like failure's part of this and then it's okay, guys. But as I've seen with you guys on the engineering team, your first hackathon was not your best one, right? And it's gotten better because you guys have had more frequency. So practice makes perfect, but also makes people feel like, all right, well, we missed this one, but we'll get the next one.
Yeah, I guess you nailed it, David. That's another thing that we didn't mention, but you did mention it, which is creating the right environment for people to feel like they can fail in a controlled environment. For people to feel like they can fail and they can try again later, not to feel like they only get one shot and that's basically it. So yeah.
Cool. Well, I know we're up against time, but are there any last things that you guys want to make sure that we cover before, we let you guys go?
Well, for me, I just had one topic, which I know was on the list of things that we potentially wanted to cover. This will potentially be a session for another podcast. But as you were mentioning hackathons with other teams, David, well, the topic that we wanted to eventually cover was the low code or no code movement. And so I'll just put it as a teaser out there for maybe another podcast, but that is something that will definitely be opening up the doors for non-technical people to create their own products without engineering teams or data teams. It will definitely not open the full door, but it will at least open it at a 50 or 75% to the point where your average Joe, as I would say, will be able to create amazing products very quickly.
Yeah, why not? I like the tease, and I think that does deserve a whole episode with its own examples. But why don't you just quickly define what that low code, no code movement and an example of different tools so people can wrap their head around it?
Yeah, well, the best way to put it is, I think, from my perspective, is back in the 2000s, building a simple website was really hard. And then came sites like Wix and landing page creators like Unbounce and others. And so those are examples of low code or no code movements, but on very niche, particular applications. Now there are other tools such as Bubble and a few others. I think AppSheets from Google, and these tools allow you to go way further than just your simple web page, where you can show some text, show some images, write a contact us form. It actually allows you to create full-fledged applications where, well, like I said, you can monetize a full product out of it. So yeah, that's what the low code, no code movement is all about.
Yeah, and I would say like I know some clients that are pretty advanced at Excel, and Excel is like a very simple way to think about, just like you said, like building a website, or some of these low code, no code things are basically a glorified, spreadsheet that you can build stuff off of. But I know Adam on our team has built an entire mobile app for reporting that pulls data from Salesforce, AdWords, Google Analytics together in one spot, and then will alert him with a notification if something hits one of his triggers. So they're pretty incredible, as you were saying, Victor, and it's really exciting. Let me ask this, and then we'll get out of here. And but I'll get it from both of you. How scared are you guys of low code, no code, or not scared at all?
You go first, Ricardo.
I gotta say, I'm not scared at all. I don't know if that sounds a bit too intrepid. But no code, low code will only get you so far. I think there'll be a time where you have to take control of this, and that is where the engineer still comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I echo what Ricardo said. At this point, I'm not scared at all, because throughout history, what technology has done is, well, I guess there's two things it has done. Number one, make people scared that technology is going to take their jobs. But that's not what actually happens. It has never happened throughout history. It just augments what you do within a very specific job. And that's what the no code, low code movement will do. It will be to the point where, for example, here in Digible, someone within paid media, for example, or the client services team will be able to build their own apps, complex or non-complex, and they will need to take that much further. And that's where someone with a very specific skill set, engineering or data, will have to come in and just augment that with whatever specific knowledge they have. For example, there's a way now for people to order a kit online and build their own house. Well, sure, you can do that, but what if you want to customize it a lot more? Well, that's when you need people with more specialized skills, and that will always be the case, I believe.
Yeah, and I think it also matters how far you want to scale it to. Like, I think the low code, no code tends to be great for proof of concept, but then at some point you probably need to like scale it beyond. So I'll go back to Data Studio because a lot of our clients will know that, but our clients could make all kinds of cool reports with Google Data Studio, but at some point that's really hard to maintain. And so you move to a more official like Tableau or Looker or whatever, like something else to do your reporting. So yeah, I think it's a great topic for another time, and we can bring some use cases to it. But for those that aren't aware, I think Bubble is a great option to look at. But if you just type in low code, no code, you can get some great team building ideas for you and the crew.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Victor, Ricardo, this was great. Appreciate you guys being good sports. Ricardo, great job on the blog, and I can't wait to see your next one.
Thank you, David. Thanks for the opportunity. And I don't know if you can give me a chance just to give out one final thought regarding this brainstorming process, and that is try it out. I invite people to take a look at it. It's not only for software engineers, because you know where we got it from, the film and the animation industry. That means it's not just boxed in for a close to reserve for somebody. So you mentioned a lot of really good opportunities or areas where people can use it in the multifamily apartment industry. Maybe they want to ramp up their newsletters, their marketing campaigns, they want to experiment with a tool out there. I think the brainstorming, this brainstorming method specifically, it will help you spark the conversation and make those efforts a bit of a reality, and not make sure that those ideas don't just stay there in a to-do bucket.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks both of you, and we'll have you on, and I don't know, the next couple of months, and we'll get into low code. So until next time.
Awesome. Well, thank you, David. Thank you, Reid, who had to go to a parents teacher parent meeting. But yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for your time. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, guys.